and we welcome in our guest tonight, and I look forward to speaking to this man because I really enjoyed the hell out of his book. The book is called And Party Every Day, The Inside Story of Casablanca Records, and the author, Larry Harris, joins us now live on the phone. How are you, Larry?
I'm good, Eddie. Thank you. It sounded as good as it did 35 years ago.
Well, as I was saying earlier, and we'll get into your book a little bit, but one of the things that I think is pretty interesting is you were, well, let's tell everybody, paint the scene. Casablanca Records and its founder and leader was Neil Bogart. You were very much his number two man. Would that be accurate?
That would be very accurate, yes.
So you were the guy there from pretty much the beginning, and you actually, as it's noted in your book, you were there when Kiss did their first rehearsal for the label, right?
I was working for Neil at Buddha Records. He was the president of Buddha Records, and we were leaving Buddha to start Casablanca when he signed Kiss. So I was still at Buddha, and so was Neil when we actually saw them perform for the first time.
Take us, I mean, do you have a strong recollection of that? I mean, I know I'm going back 35 years, but do you remember it at all?
35 years and a lot of drugs.
Exactly, that's dictated in the book too. But do you have any? Do you have any feel about it?
I remember everything about it. Yeah,
you do.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sticks in your memory. You know, there's a lot of things that happen in your life that you don't remember, or somebody might remind you of. But there are certain other things that stick in your mind that you'll never forget. You know, that goes along with when I was at Woodstock and you know, seeing Kiss for the first time in that little studio. The Latang Studio of Dance, which I thought was an interesting place.
Right.
Little tiny place. And seeing these four guys on a stage the size of a kitchen table. I mean, it was really a small stage for them.
Now, you were tipped off. Now, we're going back to 73 here, but Neil and yourself were tipped off about this group called Kiss by, was it Eddie Kramer who did their demo?
No. Neil got it. Actually, Neil, there's a lot of different stories about how this happened. But Neil got it from Bill Aucoin, who, as the story goes, had a deal with Kiss. If he got them signed within 6 months, they would keep him as manager. If not, they wouldn't. And we knew Bill, or Neil knew Bill, because he had a TV show that had record company presidents on.
Right.
Periodically, and Neil was also having a little affair with Joyce, who wound up being his second wife.
Right.
At that point, and Joyce was Bill's partner, Joyce Biowitz.
Right.
And that's how we initially got to know about Kiss.
So when you go into this studio that day, since you say you remember it vividly, tell me what you guys. I mean, what were the impressions? There weren't many people in the room. And I know that you said that, I mean, was it, what struck you when you walked out of that? Was it, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I ever saw, or I don't know, or, I mean, what was the impression? We got to sign him immediately? I mean, what was the vibe?
Well, at that point in time, I was a promotion man. I was the rock promotion guy for the label. I dealt with all the FM stations, NEW in New York, and BCN in Boston, and ABX in Detroit, and KC in St. Louis, at KMET in LA. I dealt with all what they used to call AOR or progressive rock stations.
Album rock, when DJs picked their own music and did their own shows.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's when radio was wonderful.
Right.
But
I still do that kind of radio, Larry.
But only by your show.
I still do it. I'm holding on, but I still do.
Very few and far between. There's very few and far between.
Yeah, I know.
But in any case, it wasn't, you know, I was taught in the record business, and the position I had at that time, that it wasn't up to me to decide who we signed and who we didn't sign. It was up to me to get it played.
Right.
So when I was watching these four guys on that stage, the things going through my mind is, how am I going to sell them? Because it wasn't going to be an easy sell. I knew that from day one. I mean, the makeup, I knew was going to be a problem, and it was. It was a major problem. But that's what was going through my mind, and the fact that my ears hurt so much because it was such a small room and they were so loud, and I should have been wearing earplugs, but I didn't.
Now, you're talking like 73 here, and obviously Zeppelin was very entrenched at that time in the rock world. The Who, you had these, you know, incredibly still iconic rock bands at that point. But when you go in as a label and you look at a baby band at the time like Kiss, and you see these guys dressed like this, putting on this show, playing at the level they were able to play at that time. I mean, obviously it was Neil's gig to sign the band and all that, but was Neil under the impression that we can market this, or that this was generally great music that we could sell?
Interesting question. Neil was, first of all, you have to look at this guy's background and how he believed.
Tell everybody about that, because for people that don't know, and again, I should be a little bit more clear here because I've been in the industry for years. Obviously, Larry has as well, and people listening may not know the whole story. Neil Bogart is the founder of Casablanca, and give everybody, I guess, before we get to the answer to that question, what Neil was like, because he was very well known as this guy that would do anything to break his bands, right?
Oh, yeah, Neil would hire private planes, and I mean, I'm talking about private, like old-fashioned 1920s planes to fly into conventions and stuff just to make a big splash and have everybody pay attention to him. But he was the best promotion person I ever met in my life. I mean, he was brilliant, not only when it came to records. I mean, we did eventually market films, and we even had a deal ready to go before things fell apart with McDonald's to market records in their Happy Meals.
Wow.
But Neil was an inveterate gambler. And once he believed in something, he never wanted to hear a negative. It was very difficult to give Neil a negative. So he was the kind of guy, once he committed to something in his brain, he was going to stick with it. And he was going to roll the dice till the end. And he did with Kiss. I mean, we almost went broke because of them, and we made a lot of money because of them.
Right.
And we took a big gamble on them because Warner Brothers, which was the label that was distributing us, Casablanca in the beginning, actually asked Neil to ask the band to take off the makeup.
Right.
And he never asked the band. He called the Coin and said, they asked me to ask you to take off the makeup. The Coin said no. He said, fine, thanks, goodbye. It was never like he pressured them to take off the makeup.
Right.
But he could go back to Warner Brothers at that point and said, I tried really hard, and they wouldn't do it. Right.
Well, I mean, it's universally known that Casablanca, Kiss being by far the biggest rock band that came out of that scene and that particular label and that signing. What I found interesting about the book, and again, we're talking to the author, Larry Harris, whose book is called And Party Every Day, The Inside Story of Casablanca Records. Larry, the number 2 man at this legendary label. What I found interesting is that, first of all, it's commonly thought that Kiss was the first band signed to the label, but you actually had released something before the Kiss record, which I didn't even know.
No. Kiss was the first band signed.
Oh, okay. Was there a release before?
The release was a single by a guy named Bill Amesbury, who actually changed his name now. I think he's Barbara Amesbury.
Oh, okay.
He was a Canadian singer. Because we were just starting at Warner Brothers with their system and their promotion people and their distribution organization, we wanted to have a single out there first just to warm up the waters before we hit.
Right.
And we got some airplay on Amesbury's song. It was kind of a light kind of thing. Neil was also, by the way, known for bubblegum.
Right.
He was the guy who invented bubblegum music and brought it to the public. But also, we had Buddha is very important in the Casablanca story only because we had exposure to bands not like Kiss, but similar in the respect that they were great concert acts. And we knew what we could do with a great concert act. One was Sha Na Na. Never got a lot of airplay, did sell a decent amount of records, and actually wound up with their own TV show for a number of years. But they never failed to put on an incredible show. And the second band was Genesis, who we brought over from England. We knew they had a great stage show. Peter Gabriel, people probably don't know this, a lot of people, but Peter Gabriel was their first lead singer and used to fly across the audience on a wire, and he used to be dressed up very outrageously.
Right.
So we helped to start to establish Genesis. And Kiss was just an extension of that. It was a much more drastic extension of that. But we also wound up with problems because Kiss was so good live that other groups wouldn't let them open for them.
Right.
And how do you get a group into a market, a new group, without opening for somebody who's already established? So we actually went out on the line completely, and we paid for their shows. We brought them in headliners in places they weren't getting airplay or very little airplay. and guaranteed promoters that we would pick up any shortfall. We would do the advertising. The promoters didn't have to. It was a major effort. It kind of pisses me off sometimes that Gene Simmons seems to take all the credit for Kiss. I know Ace Frehley in the past has given the label credit, and so has Paul Stanley. But Gene seems to think all the credit's his. But
does that surprise you at all?
No, not in the least.
What was your relationship like with the members of Kiss when you worked with them from the very beginning, when you met them when they were completely nobody kids from New York versus as the relationship grew? The label, it's well documented. The Alive album comes out, saves the band, saves the label, and away you guys go, and just becomes this monster machine. What were the changes you saw in the members of the band, and did you have a close relationship with them in the 10 or so years that you worked with them?
It was only about 6 years.
Okay. About 10 on the label, though, right? Or with the Casablanca label?
We were gone by 80, so.
Right. But did you have, and do you still have a relationship with them or no?
I spoke to Ace, I don't know, a couple of months ago, a month and a half ago.
Right.
Spoke to Gene. I asked him to do the forward for the book over a year ago. I thought he was going to, and then he pulled out. I guess he wasn't offered enough money. I don't know. I'll run him a benefit. And I haven't spoken to Peter in a while. I did speak to his wife, Lydia, who actually has a really interesting book out about her marriage with him.
Right, I saw that book, his ex-wife, yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I didn't know a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
And, well, why would I? And I spoke to Paul. He was doing a friend of mine's radio show, and I called up to surprise him, and he knew who I was. As soon as I mentioned, I said, well, we went to the Who concert in 1973 in Philadelphia, so he said Larry Harris.
Right.
It didn't take a rocket scientist since it was me and the four guys. I mean, so if it wasn't one of them, it had to be me.
Well, how would you categorize them to work with back then? I mean, did everything just run through management, or did you work directly with those guys a lot as well?
Well, if I was on the road with them, I worked directly with them. But most of the stuff as it should be, went through management. So they knew what was happening and could let everybody, because Kiss had a pretty large staff, let everybody down the line know what was going on. But if we were in a town together and we were doing promotional stuff, I never hung out with Kiss as you'd hang out and get stoned with them. I might have done a little, some grass or something with Peter and Ace, but nothing with Gene and Paul.
Yeah, that's interesting too, Larry. And again, we're talking to Larry, who's Larry Harris, who was the number 2 man at Casablanca Records, and who's written a great book called "And Party Every Day" about that period. But it's funny, I find that interesting, Larry, because there's a lot of discussion in your book about the drug use back then amongst the label and the craziness that went on in the hallways and things like that. And it's funny that Kiss, well, Gene and Paul, I should say, not so much Ace and Peter, but Gene and Paul are notoriously known for being anti-drug and anti, that sort of lifestyle. But here they are. Their record label at the time was just out of control. It's a pretty interesting dynamic.
I don't think the label was out of control at all. I think we had total control of what we were doing.
But in terms of the behavior of what you guys were doing,
that was the culture.
Yeah, see, that's what's interesting to me, because
it wasn't just. I mean, I'd go to a radio station, and I'm not going to mention his name. It was a top 40 station. He was probably one of the biggest disc jockeys ever in America, and we'd be doing blow while he was on the air playing top 40 music, and plenty of FM stations at the time. But bankers were doing it, accountants were doing it, lawyers were doing it. I mean, it was just so part of the culture of the 70s. And I think a lot of that has to do, the Vietnam War was ending, and women's lib was really coming into its own, and society was changing.
Yeah, I mean, being that I obviously, grew up in that period but didn't work in the industry, it's seeing how things are now versus reading your book and taking you back to that time, whether it's the guy who ran the Billboard charts being in your pocket, or, who's slamming who behind the desk in their office, and a white coat of powder on everything in the hallways of the record company.
I never said that.
Wait, what didn't?
I never said there was a white coat of powder on everything in the hallway.
It wasn't in your book?
No. You might have got that from Hitmen or something.
I thought for sure it said it was almost like there was a a film of dust on everything in the label. I don't know.
No, not at all. I mean, the promotion department did a lot of drugs, and a few people in the press department, but the sales department, the accounting department, they didn't. The legal department didn't. It was us guys. It was the promotion guys. It was the management team who ran the label who were doing all the drugs.
Because it was it was also a schmooze tactic, right? I mean, because as you said, back then when the labels, when the DJs themselves, you'd have to work more than just a program director when you went to a label, right? Went to a radio station, rather.
Oh, yeah. Program director was like one of, 8 guys or 8 people.
Right.
In my case, I mean, in Top 40, you would just work the program or music director. But in what I did, I'd have to go to every disc jockey that was on the air from 6 in the morning till midnight, And
it was basically whatever they needed that would help the cause to get your record played at that point, right?
No, I didn't play it that way. I mean, it was a culture, and it was to me more that if you were friends with somebody, you shared your drugs. I mean, that's even before I got into the record business. I did that.
Right.
And I became friends with these guys. I mean, these are the people I talk to every day. And and I had the money because I had the expense account to buy them.
Right.
So why not take advantage of that? Because they're my buddy. In fact, some of these guys I even talked about I went to college with.
Why did you feel, Larry, that now was the right time to write a book about the history of Casablanca? Do you feel there was a lot of misinformation out there? Did you feel that it was the time that you just needed to get this story out? Was there one thing that triggered you to say, I've got to write this book and get it out?
Well, not really, because I started writing this book 10 years ago.
Okay.
And then I put it away, and then I wrote it. There's probably been 8 versions of this book. And I never really dreamed I would get it published. That kind of just started happening about 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago. When there's tons of people turned us down, and then there's one company, Backbeat Books, which specializes in music-related books, said they loved the idea and they wanted me to, finish it and make it tighter. And so I did, and it came out. I really never dreamed it would be out.
How's the response been? Because I know for myself, a fan of not only music, but the music industry and these stories, and myself having worked in the industry, I mean, I loved reading some of these stories, even though the Casablanca was obviously made their name as well with disco, which I wasn't a fan of. I still found the book to be really entertaining. How has the response been since it's been out? Has it been kind of a little niche where people are just discovering it as it gets kind of passed around? How's it gone so far for you?
A lot of that. We've been lucky. We've had some luck with the Chicago Tribune did a big article. The Onion did a nice piece on it. I've been on since I'm friends still with a lot of radio people. I've been on a lot of syndicated radio shows. Mojo Magazine did a nice piece on it. But it's really starting to spread word of mouth.
Right.
We've tried to concentrate on a lot of marketing on the Kiss websites and fanzine sites, and because we know, and also the disco sites as well, because we know there's a lot of fans there for Casablanca, and for Kiss, and for Donna Summer and the Village People and Parliament and all those people. So far it's been pretty good. Supposedly I'm supposed to get a movie offer next month. We'll see.
Wow, that would be pretty awesome.
But everybody's reaction, almost every single person that I speak to, whether I know them or not, is pretty much the same reaction. Most people are really surprised that I could write as well as the book came out. So I think they thought I was a total airhead. So.
Well, what do you think it is, Larry, that intrigues people so much about Casablanca as a label?
Again, it's Neil Bogart. And Neil's hero was a guy named Mike Todd, who was married to Elizabeth Taylor. I think she says she's the only husband she ever really loved. But he was known as the P.T. Barnum of his day, and that's what Neil was. Neil was a showman, and he wanted to bring all this stuff as showbiz as possible to the masses.
Mm-hmm. And he certainly did. Larry Harris is my guest for a few more minutes here. Eddie Trunk Live, Sirius XM, The Boneyard. We are talking about Larry's book, which is available now, called And Party Every Day, the inside story of Casablanca Records. Larry, let me ask you about a couple other rock bands that were on the label. The other one besides Kiss that is widely known. And I always say to people that this is a band that, and I've talked to the band about it, and they agree, people either absolutely loved or never heard of. And that's Angel. And I find that that's exactly the case when I bring this group up. And you do a lot of time, you spend a good amount of time talking about Angel and the frustration you guys had in trying to really break them on the radio. What were your thoughts on the band? I kind of got the impression reading the book, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you weren't really the biggest fan of what they were about.
I was a fan of what they were about. I thought their music was actually better than Kiss's music, technically. I thought Punky Meadows was probably a better guitar player than Ace Frehley was. But Angel was never able to write that hit. They also had, these things happened to them. Their stage shows, something would always go wrong. I mean, we'd spend an immense amount of money on putting together these intricate shows for them, or helping them with it. And once they were on stage in front of an audience, things would break, things wouldn't work the way they was. But it was constant. It wasn't once in a while, and it was kind of disheartening in that respect. But Kiss also was one of the reasons we signed Angel. Aside from liking their music enough, and it being different enough from Kiss's with the keyboards and everything, is that they were antithesis of Kiss. They were all white. Kiss was all black. They were all good-looking guys with great hair, and just really good-looking band. And Kiss was not the world's best looking band, and most people didn't know what they looked like at that point anyway because of the makeup. And we thought them opening for Kiss, going out on the road, oh, this is a cinch, this is a no-brainer, this is going to be great. Well, at the time Angel came out, we were having some contractual difficulties with Kiss because we hadn't paid them any royalties in like 2 years, and because we didn't have the money to pay them. And Kiss refused to take out Angel because they felt that would help us, and they didn't want to help us at that point.
Interesting. And you talk about the Angel stage show, which is... I'm sorry, go ahead.
The interesting thing for some of your readers is the band they did take out is a band I passed on a little while before. The band Kiss decided instead of Angel to take out on the road to help break them was Rush. And I had passed on Rush a year or so before.
That's what I was going to bring up, because that's an interesting. The way you tell that story in the book is pretty interesting. It still sounds like it kind of haunts you to this day that you passed on signing Rush.
I laugh about it. I just couldn't get past Geddy Lee's nose. I really couldn't.
That did it for you? I can't sign this band because of that guy's nose? Well,
that and I had the flu at the time, and but that was one of the things I looked at when I went, oh my God.
Well, and the thing, and we have a lot of people that always call this show and are intrigued by the story of Angel. And you mentioned their stage show. It was funny because they never really, like I said, cracked through, but they had this large and expensive show. As you said, it would break down a lot. It's funny.
It was like in Spinal Tap when
right, exactly.
Yeah.
The pods, like they literally probably inspired that in Spinal Tap, where they actually got stuck.
Honestly, I think they did. We actually, Michael McKean was on our label, was on Casablanca. We had a Lenny and Squiggy record, and I think Michael picked up a lot about Angel being on our label.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. And people are always looking for video and additional stuff from Angel. What I didn't know in reading your book was that you guys actually were planning on putting out a feature film on them, right?
We were talking about it. In fact, if you go to the book's website, CasablancaBook.com, there's a whole bunch of old Angel videos. I mean, stuff people have never seen. There's Kiss videos. There's a Cher video. There's all kinds of videos. But there's probably Angel stuff that Angel fans haven't seen, and probably Kiss stuff that Kiss fans may not have seen.
Was the Angel movie shot and scrapped, or never shot at all?
No, never shot.
It was never shot.
No.
Okay, because I wasn't sure on that, if some of it had been done and you guys just decided not to put it out. And of course, they would later turn up. One of the last things they would do be in the movie Foxes that you guys had a hand in as well, right?
Right. Yes, that was one of our movies. Yeah.
Well, the book is called "And Party Every Day: An Inside Story of Casablanca Records." Just a couple more quick ones, Larry. A rock band that getting really under the radar here, but they do have some fans, especially in where I'm from in New Jersey, is a group called Trigger. Were you involved with them at all?
A lot of people ask me about them. Not all that much. At that point, my position in the company was keeping all the day-to-day stuff going, not jumping into promotion as much as I used to. But the bad luck for them is they came out right when we were coming out with the first movie Neil ever produced, the only movie Neil ever produced, which was Thank God It's Friday, which starred Donna Summer and Paul Jabbar and a bunch of our acts. And the whole company was focused on Thank God It's Friday because obviously the guy who ran the company produced the movie. So, everybody's attention was drawn to that as opposed to anything else. So that didn't help. And at that point, Casablanca was being more known as a disco label than a rock and roll label. So,
did that frustrate you at all? I also got the sense throughout reading the book that there was you had kind of made a statement where the label had obviously built its name on Kiss. You had Angel, but with the success of disco and how Casablanca was regarded as a pioneering label for that scene, that was it a struggle when disco became so synonymous with Casablanca to lure rock bands in, or was Neil not even really worried about that?
Number one, it was a struggle. We put a full court press on Marshall Tucker. The whole company almost went to see them and hang out with them and do stuff. We couldn't sign them. They didn't want to sign with us. But I did bring Neil Dire Straits, and he passed on it because he felt we could do 5 disco albums for what one Dire Straits album would cost. So in a way, he didn't care, and in a way, if he could do it and it was something established already, okay, fine.
Right.
But he was also off doing other things. I talked briefly about the McDonald's thing, and we had started a kids' works and a book works and a Casablanca artworks. I mean, there were a whole bunch of things in the works at that point. The company Neil had no end in sight of the different things he wanted to accomplish.
Have you had any fallout from this book since it's been published? People that you wrote about that are either, great job or upset, or you left something out or anything like that? I mean, has there been any surprises since this has been out there?
Actually, people like Scott Shannon have called me, who's in the book. Scott used to, I don't know if your audience knows, he's a big disc jockey.
Right, in New York here, yeah.
And he's also syndicated, too. He's got an oldie show that it's syndicated.
Right.
And he called me and loved it. He just loved it and loved it. And I mentioned something to him. I said, Scott, there was a story I left out because I thought you'd sue me. And he said, well, what's that? I said, well, you were on 747, and at Casablanca, everybody traveled first class. That was another thing we were known for, spending a lot of money on that kind of stuff. And I said, you were in first class in the 747. You got a little tipsy. You went upstairs, and you screwed this 70-year-old woman.
70? 70.
70. Yeah. And he just laughed and said, oh, you could have put it in the book. It would have been okay. I left her up there unconscious. It was okay.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, there's some really great stuff in here. And again, folks should really check it out to read about what this label was about in the 70s.
What the music industry was like in the 70s.
Exactly. Well, that's just it. That's what I really found interesting. I went to dinner with someone from a record label the other day. And
they made you pay, right?
No. Well, the record industry is in that dire straits now that they almost to that point, but they were willing to pay. But you had to see what they have to go through just to buy you a slice of pizza in 2009. And I had just got done reading your book, and it was like, wow, how times have changed, what you guys used to do versus where we are now. It's pretty sad, actually, that the industry is kind of falling apart, and I'm sure...
if you ask them to send you a couple of CDs, you got to fill out a form.
Yeah, I know. It really, and some labels aren't even sending CDs anymore. I mean, most of the music that I get comes through, over the computer, a digital MP3 to play.
And it makes it so cold. It makes it so not like you're part of it anymore. It's just amazing how the music industry has really cut their own throats. I mean,
Yeah, and they
fight with radio stations about royalty issues. And it used to be that radio and music were like hand in hand working together to accomplish something. and that's ended. Now they're like at other ends of the table. So.
Yeah. The one thing, too, that I noticed in reading this book, I've always been a fan of Billy Squires, and you talk about signing Piper and not signing Piper, and I think
I didn't sign Piper. I introduced Billy Squire to Bill Aucoin.
Right, which it's the first time I ever read in print that I mean, it was speculated for a long time that Billy Squire was gay, but I never saw it written in print that somebody said that.
I don't know that he's gay. He could be bisexual. He doesn't have to be gay. I mean,
well, that's true too. But you had said that you didn't sign that the label didn't sign him because he was in a relationship with Bill.
Well, what I said was we were under the impression he was in a relationship with Bill.
Okay.
And that we had Kiss. We also didn't want to load our label up with one manager's artist.
Right. You didn't want the perception that you were just in the tank with one particular guy, and if he went, he'd basically become an A&R extension of Casablanca if that was the case.
Well, that, and what if we did have a fight with Kiss, or what if we did have a problem with this other band? Then it affects your whole relationship situation. It makes it touchy.
Right. Well, Larry, and my final question to you is, give me the craziest thing, if you can. What was the craziest moment in the history of Casablanca Records for you that you saw working with all these artists in the 70s, in the label world in the 70s? Is there one thing that stands out, or you just still think about it and shake your head that you're still alive?
that I'm still alive?
Well, just, anything that kind of really resonates with you from that point.
Well, it had nothing to do with my life, but, well, there was.
It does not. I shouldn't have said your life, but just the one story, your favorite story.
Wow. Wow.
I love the part about the burning desk.
Well, that's not my favorite. Probably one of my favorite stories would be my first time I met Rodney Dangerfield, and he came into my office, which I kept at like 20 degrees because I was doing so much blow and everything. And I always liked it cold anyway. And Rodney's in my office for like 10 minutes, and he's sweating like a pig. And it's in fact, you know what? No, a better Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney's at the airport with a friend of mine, with one of our guys, doing a promotion. And Rodney pulls out a bottle of Noxzema, unscrews it, sitting in the airport, and does a couple of hits. And, my promotion guy goes over to him and goes, Rodney, you can't do that here. And he said, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? I'm Rodney Dangerfield. They can't do anything to me. And I mean, that was in a capsule. That's the way we all felt. I mean, hey, we're not doing anything wrong. We're having a good time. We're going to do blow in front of people. We're going to smoke. We're going to, it was fine. And do you think it was that mentality that ultimately took Casablanca down? No, it was Neil's. It was the gambling mentality that Neil had. That the object was Polygram bought Casablanca for half of Casablanca for $15 million, and they were going to buy the other half for 5 times whatever we earned over 5 years. So Neil's attitude, being a gambler, was he was going to roll the dice and spend their money to make as much as he could possibly make, and then it would be worth 5 times as much. It didn't work. It almost worked. But the Kiss 4 solo albums died. Donna Summer sued to get off the label. The Village People were about over. Disco had almost run its course. You could see the writing on the wall, kind of. We did have success with people like Robin Williams, but not enough to... The 4 Kiss solo albums broke our back. Yeah, that's a big theme in the book, too, is that those 4 Kiss solo albums really, forcing them to put so many copies out, having them be returned, just the whole, that was really a big turning point in not only the evolution and history of Kiss, but obviously the impact it had on Casablanca. Yeah, we really thought, even if it didn't sell incredibly well, it would sell okay. But it didn't even do that. I mean, it was really a fiasco. And the Kiss fans just weren't there for them. Right. Larry, what do you do now, just in closing this out? Are you still in the music industry? Are you retired? I work for some labels. I get them exposure through syndicated and talk radio for their product. I'm going to be working Roseanne Cash soon. All kinds of products. I just work Neil Sedaka. But I also I syndicate, actually, a few radio shows of my own. I'm working on syndicating. I've done that in the 80s. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm still in the music business, radio business, and anything else. Anything else I find exciting. Right.
Well, the book is great, and hey, there's still a few days before Christmas, so if you have a fan of, has a great interest in the music industry from the 70s and Casablanca, or maybe loaded with great photos and stories about Kiss and Angel for our listeners here on the Boneyard, definitely something to check out. Again, the book is called And Party Every Day, The Inside Story of Casablanca Records.
Oh, by the way, Eddie, I saw you the other night on the VH1 show.
Yeah.
You impressed the shit out of me. You answered every question right.
Oh, did I really?
Yeah.
Well, that all comes down to the editing. If they want to make me look stupid, they could just take the 2 I got wrong and just show those. So okay. I have to thank the editors on that. I'm not as smart as I seem, but thank you.
Well, I was impressed.
All right, I'm glad. Larry, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for being on the show. And again, I encourage everybody to read the book. I'll tell you, I read it on a flight to L.A. I got 2 small kids. I don't have much time to read a book, but I put this one in my bag, and it made the 6 hours on the plane go by. And I'll tell you what else I did. Reading the book and reading the stories about what went on in your offices and stuff on Sunset Boulevard, I was staying at the Hyatt on Sunset, and I had to get out and literally walk to where the Casablanca building was just to see the front of it, because I had read the book and had such a vision of what it was like in the 70s. I had to see what the building looked like today.
Yeah, it's still there.
It's still there, and I saw it because you list the number of Sunset that it was. So while I was in L.A., I made a point to make sure I just took a look and said, man, that's where all that stuff went down. You know, it's pretty cool.
Oh, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it as much as you did.
I did. Larry, thank you for the time. I appreciate it, and good luck with the book.
Thank you so much.
All right, man. Take care.
You too.
Larry Harris, again, the book is called And Party Every Day, The Inside Story of Casablanca Records. And as we were talking about, Casablanca, of course, known as the place where Kiss was launched and hatched and signed and all that. And there was another rock band on there. And as I mentioned, it's a case of love them or never heard of them. So for everybody who loves them, here's some Angel.